tonight's discussion is going to be in English because of the very international scope of this show. Before we start, there are many people I want to thank for making this exhibition happen. The first is the really incredible and fantastic staff at the Museum of Bat Yam. They've worked tirelessly for many months and took a big risk on this show, which was very experimental, strange kind of art show, I think. And I'm very grateful to everybody here, very much. We are trying to make the sort of impossible happen by having two people join us via Skype. One of them, Nicky Russell, is in the UK right now. He's the guy on the right. He's one of the members of Reactor, whose work you're seeing upstairs. And the other guy who's being teleported in here is Edgar Arcedo, who's on the left. And he's also the founder of the Watts House project. There's a video and photos and books upstairs. To my left is your right, Douglas Paulson, who's part of Perfume. And sitting across from us are Itamar and Yossi.
For myself.
And I guess we're just going to get started here and have a conversation. Each of us is going to sort of talk a little bit about our work for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves and with you. So I don't know if anybody here has ever been to one of Liam Gillick's community boxes, or maybe one of Rikrit Tiravanijah's curry parties. These are really kind of famous art events. And if you have, or if you've been to something similar that may have happened here, you would have walked into a room full of people who probably looked at you kind of funny and given you a bit of a dirty look, maybe, or maybe just ignored you, even though you may have known that it was all art and it was all cool and it was okay to be there. I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. They're kind of examples. What I'm talking about generally is relational aesthetics, which is a term that was coined in the late 90s by a French theorist named Nicolas Bourriaud. And he basically wrote a book of the same title, Relational Aesthetics. And in it, he basically defines a movement of art based on social relations. He considers social relations to be forces for social change and catalysts of micro-utopias. These are small, temporary arenas of community. What resulted were basically uber cool art events confined to white box galleries and their mailing lists. I'm very kind of simplifying art history here right now, but someone named Claire Bishop came along and responded to this, to the kind of cliquishness of relational aesthetics in an essay called Antagonism in Relational Aesthetics. She advocated for what later came to be called social practice. And she was critiquing it for its cliquishness, basically. Social practice is one term for what's been called many names, but it's participatory public art. And it's not necessarily reactionary to relational aesthetics. It's parallel. And I just want to make a little distinction between these two to start us off. My idea of the difference between relational aesthetics and social practice is art that reinforces a closed system versus art that challenges it. And even though it's really nice to go to galleries and feel cool and hang out, what we really need, and we meaning a very, very broad definition of we, is something that can take us beyond that, or at least make us question what that means. Sometimes that can be uncomfortable, makes us deal with issues we'd rather not deal with, or people we don't want to associate with, but that's a good thing. That's something that every society that strives to be open should embrace. what I'm really talking about when I say social practice is artwork that communicates to its audience, not via an image or an object or a thing, really, but through an experience, through something that is temporary and lives and bypasses the symbolic realm of fine art, the symbolism behind images and objects and films, and goes directly to individuals as well as communities and social networks. And this kind of work focuses on relationships between people, as well as between people and their surroundings and their societies and the structures that comprise them. I basically don't really care whether this artwork is really qualifies as art with a capital A. I don't really engage in that debate very much because I think it's a formalist debate. This kind of work doesn't always smell like art or look like art or feel like art because it borrows languages and forms from a variety of non-art fields. Some of them are activism, architecture and design, event planning, systems theory, even engineering. It resides in the domain of art simply because art is malleable. Art can handle projects that no other field can handle. It can make people do stuff that can't fit really into academics, it can't fit into business, it can't fit into activism. And art today, that kind of is what makes art arguably a much broader field than any other. It's elastic enough to encompass very radical acts that can't happen in other places, like being shot in the arm. I'm thinking of a work by Chris Burden, tattooing poor people in Cuba by Santiago Sierra, getting people to move mountains in Peru, which is a work by Francis Elise. These kinds of works really have the potential to affect change outside of art, outside of closed systems. And it's, I think, what makes art so attractive today. It gives artists and the people who participate in these projects a license to sync up with other very abstract social forces without having to justify or name those forces or be regulated by them. This is what makes art so powerful. And I'm not really talking about grandiose projects. These can be small gestures, small exercises in broadening people's horizons or opening up some kind of alternative. And it's because it's not regulated. There are no rules in art. Art today is one of the two major industries in the world that has no index. Art and the international arms trade are the only two industries that don't have an index or a rule book. Price for art, the price of an artwork is negotiated based on social contract, on what people think it's worth or agree that something is worth. And I think that's a real rich arena that we can explore. So I'm here to argue that creating atypical social situations is a very healthy thing for a society that wants to be inclusive and democratic. Art, especially in the guise of the kind of art that I'm talking about, the social practice, brings people together. It's a social leveler. It gives people from different classes or arenas of the world ways to meet. It capitalizes on the social potential of art and inherently galvanizes everything that's really good about art. And one really great thing is that it's brought all of us here together. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass the microphone on to Douglas Paulson right now.
My name is Douglas Paulson. I'm from New York City, and I am part of a group called Perfume that is, it's three of us. It's me and these two guys who live in Copenhagen in Denmark. I'm also part of a few other groups, and always, in whatever I'm doing, I always work collectively or collaboratively. And I think that's like a big part of, I guess, what we're here talking about today. But in regards to my work with Perfume, we have two videos out here. One is the story of a 6-month project that we did in the harbor of Copenhagen. And the harbor of Copenhagen, if you haven't been there, is basically dominated by really expensive buildings that cost like millions and millions of dollars to build, and the occasional really expensive bar or restaurant, and is accessible only by guys in expensive speedboats, which is a kind of a disaster, because the water of Copenhagen is fundamental to its infrastructure. It's a little bit like Amsterdam in that there's canals all over the place. So for 6 months, we just did everything we could to make that space not really democratic, but almost an anarchy, where we had materials, we had all these floating things, and there was an open invitation for anyone to come, build stuff on the water, take boats out for free, use the water to engage the city in a new way. And that open invitation becomes an enormous, expansive, collaborative process that isn't about a few artists doing their work. It's about a few people making it possible for other people to come and have an exchange. And we have this video about that, and that's kind of one extreme of our process. Super public thing that involves like thousands of people. And our other video in this show is sort of an example of the other extreme in our work, where we took the role of postmen and made enormous postcards and drove all over Iceland delivering these postcards. So it's a great way for us to see Iceland and meet great people. But it's also a way for a child in Reykjavik to send a note to their mother in wherever, little town in Iceland, and then for that person to send a little note to someone else. So it was also a sort of open invitation, but a very intimate and private one. So that's sort of two extremes, and I guess as we talk, I can maybe say some more things, but.
Great. Edgar, I think we're ready for you.
Sure. So can everybody actually see us? Can they see me? Yeah? Okay. And, I've had a little bit of trouble hearing some of the discussion. Some of the words are dropping out. Are you having that same experience with me?
No, we hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good. Okay. So everything I have to say will seem more important because it'll be clearer to everybody. That's a joke. So we described the Watts House project as an ongoing collaborative artwork in the shape of a neighborhood redevelopment. So artists, architects, and residents working together to help to transform their community. We're located on East 107th Street, which is directly across the street from the historic Watts Towers that were built by an Italian immigrant by the name of Simon Rodia, who began building them in his backyard in the 1920s and finished them in the 1950s. And it's smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Our project has two major branches to it. The first one is the renovation stage. It's the transformation of the homes on the block. And again, that's a collaboration between artists, architects, and residents. And then the second branch is our 5 programs, which is the creation of an artist in residency program, which currently we have approximately 17 artists and architects working with families on their homes. So that's the transformation of the interior, exterior, front yard, and backyard of their property. The creation of a cafe is one of our long-term goals. We also have a property that we purchased that we're transforming into a kind of a meta community center that we call the platform. And the idea there is that, folks can use it for any way in which they see fit, from birthday parties to film screenings or plays. we have we have programming and community activism, and then our last branch, which is really the foundation of what we're trying to do down in the neighborhood, is our lease to own program, and in that we hope to work with renters, which makes up about 50% of the neighborhood, and transition them into owners. And one of the things that we realized in the process of doing this work, and maybe this is a discussion for all of us as artists working in communities in general, is that, you know, we incentivize others to make investments when you make investments yourselves. And that could be volunteers, that can also be speculators who may want to come in and, you know, gentrify the neighborhood and then force this poor community out of their homes. And one of the things at the end of the day we want to make sure that we're doing is infusing both real value as well as aesthetic value into the community, but that it stays affordable, so that if one family moves out, another one can move in and it still be available to them. So that's Watts House Project in a nutshell.
That's great. Nikki.
Yeah. So to summarize Reactor's relationship to social practice, the projects that Reactor produce intend to place an audience at the center of the work, by which I mean that the audience are active participants and to varying degrees collaborators on the projects, and that therefore without them the work couldn't happen. The projects often take the form of a social microcosm with their own internal iconography, logic and meanings. The project that we're screening within the exhibition, Total Chaos, was a multi-leveled scaffolding structure erected to form a microcosmic society. Participants entering Total Chaos took on new identities and progressed through the many interlinked roles within the structure. Hundreds of people performing simultaneously in order for this system to function. Within the project, participants were required to take on a variety of work roles. For instance, time was centralized via a unit clock, and the unit clock was operated by an individual within the world. So this position, this work role, had to be operated at all times, otherwise time stops within the world and nobody knows then when to stop doing what they're doing. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So within a Reactor situation, the projects try to eliminate the division between a audience member and a performer, and allow anybody to take on a role that others may perceive to be staff or belonging to the authors of the work. So I guess in that sense, the projects can be seen to give participants access to power within the work. They have the option to change it if they wish, accepting that that will require time and effort on their part. Yet because of this kind of diffusion of authorship within the work, no one within the work, and this would include Reactor, is in a position to experience or impose a single totalizing account of what the work is, and therefore fully commodify or consume the event as a whole. I guess with each project that Reactor creates, new groups or new communities are formed by these projects for the duration of each one. These participants come together within the structure of the work through their beliefs or interests in a particular element of them. Whilst they enter into a situation that has been partially authored by Reactor as a group, we see that simply as a kind of starting position. There'll always be a starting position within any encounter. Within each React project, there are different starting positions, and the extent to which this determines or affects what occurs varies from project to project. Yeah, that's a summary.
Hey, Nikki, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, what the word reactor? Where did that come from?
Where did Reactor come from?
Yeah.
It was the name. It was the name of the first event that we ever did together.
I mean, but you used it for what reason?
The word reactor was used in the sense of a reactor being something with which lots of things collide within and create something else. So it wasn't used in the sense of reacting to something, but this idea of this collision of different elements producing something else.
Is it a metaphor that extended from science in your guys' thinking?
Loosely, perhaps, yes.